The smell of ash still hung over King's Landing. The streets were filled with smoke, silence, and death. Burnt bodies lay in the ruins like dark shadows. The war was over, or at least that's what everyone believed. Daenerys Targaryen had won. But in truth, the war was only beginning again. Jon Snow stood alone before the Red Keep. His armor was dirty, his sword still red with blood. He had seen children burn, mothers scream, and men die begging for mercy. This wasn't what he fought for. This wasn't the world he promised to protect. He walked through the halls where the Dragon Queen now ruled. Soldiers bowed as he passed, but their faces showed fear, not loyalty. The Unsullied stood like statues, cold and unblinking. Every step Jon took echoed like a drumbeat of doubt inside his chest. When he entered the throne room, he saw her, the Queen of Fire and Blood. Daenerys stood before the Iron Throne, her silver hair shining in the light of the broken ceiling. The throne behind her was half melted by Drogon's fire, its twisted metal glowing faintly like dying embers. Daenerys turned slowly. "You came," she said softly. Her voice still carried warmth, but her eyes burned with something else, power. "Do you see it, Jon? The world we will build, a world free from tyrants, from chains." Jon stepped closer. "You burned them," he said quietly. "All of them. Innocent people, Dany." Her face hardened. "They were not innocent. They followed Cersei. They allowed evil to grow. The world we're making cannot be built on mercy." Jon's jaw tightened. "What about the North? What about Sansa? You'll burn them too if they don't kneel." She smiled faintly. If they don't kneel, they don't deserve to live in the new world. And that was the moment Jon realized. There was no going back. The woman he loved was gone. In her place stood a queen who would destroy everything in the name of peace. Tyrion entered quietly, his face hollow, his hands shaking. He looked at Daenerys, then at Jon. "You know what she's done," Tyrion said to Jon. "You know what she'll do next." Daenerys frowned. "Enough, take him away." "He betrayed me." Unsullied soldiers grabbed Tyrion's arms. Jon's hand moved to his sword by instinct, but he stopped himself. Not yet. He couldn't save Tyrion now. As Tyrion was dragged away, he shouted, "You have to choose, Jon. Her or the realm." Those words echoed in Jon's mind all night. He went to Tyrion's cell later, when the guards had grown tired. Tyrion looked up with weary eyes. "You love her," Tyrion said. "I know. But love is the death of duty, remember." Jon stared at the wall. "And duty is the death of love," he whispered. Tyrion nodded. "Maybe, but if you do nothing, thousands will die. Today it's King's Landing. Tomorrow it's Winterfell." Jon didn't answer. He left the cell with a heart full of fire. The next morning, the Red Keep echoed with screams. Grey Worm was executing Lannister prisoners in the courtyard. Jon shouted for him to stop, but the Unsullied commander ignored him. Blood splashed over the stones as heads rolled one after another. Jon pulled out Longclaw and blocked Grey Worm's sword. The soldiers froze in shock. The two men glared at each other, the air between them heavy with rage. "She is my queen," Grey Worm hissed, "and she's killing everyone." Jon shouted. The soldiers began to surround him. Jon knew that if he didn't act now, he'd lose everything. He raised Longclaw high and yelled, "The queen is mad. She burned the city. No more blood!" Some men hesitated. Others lifted their spears. Then the first arrow flew, and with that single shot, the war for the Iron Throne began again. The courtyard of the Red Keep turned into chaos within seconds. The Unsullied formed tight ranks, moving like a wave of steel. But the Northmen, and a few remaining soldiers from the Vale who had followed Jon to the city, began shouting his name. "Snow!" someone yelled. Then another voice, "The true king." Jon didn't want this. He had never wanted crowns or wars. But Daenerys had left him no choice. She had crossed the line between justice and madness. And now her dream of freedom had become a nightmare made of fire and ash. Grey Worm lunged again, their swords clashing with a sound that echoed through the courtyard. Jon blocked, twisted, and struck back, his blade slicing Grey Worm's arm. The commander fell to one knee, but the Unsullied didn't move. They waited for their queen's command, and she wasn't there. "Stand down," Jon shouted. "No more killing. The war is over," but the Unsullied never disobeyed. A dozen spears turned toward him. Jon braced himself, and then from behind the walls came the sound of horns. The northern army had arrived. Tormund Giantsbane led them, wildlings mixed with Stark-men, storming through the broken gates. Their banners, the direwolf and the free folks' marks, waved against the smoky sky. "Jon Snow," Tormund bellowed. "You started without us." Jon lowered his sword, his chest heaving. The sight of his old friend filled him with something he hadn't felt in days. Hope. The Unsullied hesitated. They were disciplined, but they were outnumbered now. The northern men surrounded the courtyard, swords drawn, eyes burning with fury. Then Daenerys appeared at the balcony above the throne room, her white hair whipping in the wind. Drogon perched behind her like a living mountain of shadow and flame. Her voice carried over the courtyard. "Jon Snow!" she shouted. "You betray me for them. After all we've done." Jon looked up. "You burned a city, Dany. You burned children." Her eyes glistened, but not with sorrow. "They were the price for peace." Jon's voice cracked. "Peace built on ashes isn't peace. It's tyranny." For a moment, they simply stared at each other, the last pieces of who they used to be flickering between them. Then Daenerys raised her hand. "Dracarys." The air trembled. Drogon roared, fire spilling from his throat. Jon barely had time to move. He ran as the courtyard exploded in a wave of flame. The heat burned his skin. The blast threw men into the air. The dragon's fire swallowed everything in its path. Unsullied northerners, wildlings alike. Jon hit the ground hard, rolling through smoke and rubble. He could smell his hair burning. His ears rang. When he looked up, the world was fire. But the north didn't fall easily. Archers on the walls fired volleys at the dragon, while Tormund and his men charged through the chaos to pull Jon to his feet. "She's lost her bloody mind!" Tormund shouted. Jon coughed. "I know, but we need to stop her before she kills everyone." They made their way toward the great hall through the chaos. Soldiers fought in the corridors, Stark men clashing with Unsullied, screams echoing off the stone walls. Blood soaked the floor. The Red Keep, once a symbol of power, had become a graveyard. In the throne room, Daenerys stood alone again, breathing heavily, her hands trembling. Drogon rested outside, his wings folded like dark clouds. She stared at the throne, the dream she'd chased all her life, and finally stepped toward it. But before her hand could touch the steel, Jon entered. His armor was scorched, his face covered in ash and pain. He raised Longclaw, but his eyes were full of tears. "Don't make me do this," he said softly. Daenerys turned, her face breaking into a sad smile. "You're here to kill me, aren't you?" Jon's voice shook. "I'm here to stop you. You can't stop what's already begun," she whispered. "I freed the world. You just don't understand it yet." He stepped closer, his sword lowering slightly. "You could have been the best of us, Dany, but now you're just another tyrant." Her hand reached for him, not in anger, but in something like love. "Then do what you must, Aegon Targaryen." Tears fell down his face. "My name is Jon Snow." And with that, Longclaw pierced her heart. She gasped, her eyes wide with shock, then peace. Her body fell against him, and Jon held her as she slipped away, whispering her name until her last breath. Outside, Drogon roared, a sound so full of grief that the very walls of the Red Keep seemed to shake. The dragon landed, saw her lifeless body, and lowered his head. Jon stepped back, expecting the fire. But Drogon didn't burn him. Instead, the dragon melted the Iron Throne, turning it into molten steel, as if he understood that it had destroyed them all. Then he took Daenerys' body in his claws and flew away into the clouds. Jon watched until they disappeared, his heart broken, his fate sealed, but this time, unlike the story we know, he didn't surrender. He didn't walk away. Jon Snow would not return to the north in chains. He would take the throne, by force, if he had to. The next morning, the Red Keep was quiet. The smoke had settled, and the fires had died, leaving only blackened ruins and broken stone. The Iron Throne was gone, melted into a pool of dark metal that still steamed faintly in the cold morning air. The symbol of power that had destroyed kings and queens for centuries was nothing more than ashes now. Jon Snow sat on the steps where the throne once stood, his sword lying across his knees. His hands were trembling, not from fear, but from the weight of what he had done. The woman he loved was dead. The queen the world feared was gone. But peace didn't come with her death, only silence and uncertainty. Tormund found him there, his beard singed, his clothes torn. "You did it, lad," he said quietly. "You stopped her." Jon shook his head. "I killed her." "There's a difference," Tormund sighed and sat beside him. "Aye, but if you hadn't, she'd have burned the rest of us." "Sometimes the right thing doesn't feel right," Jon didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the pool of melted metal. "What happens now?" he asked softly. Before Tormund could reply, Davos Seaworth entered the hall, limping slightly. His expression was grim. "Grey Worm's still alive," Davos said. "And he's gathering what's left of the Unsullied. They say you murdered their queen. They're calling you traitor, calling you traitor." Jon looked up. "He's not wrong," Davos frowned. "Aye, maybe not, but if you don't take control now, boy, you'll be dead before nightfall. He'll march on you with every man he's got." Tormund grinned, his eyes lighting with the thrill of another fight. "Then let him come. We'll give him a northern welcome." Jon stood slowly. "No, enough killing. I'll speak to him." Outside the castle walls, the Unsullied stood in perfect ranks, their spears raised high, their faces cold as stone. Grey Worm was at their front, his arm bound from the wound Jon had given him. His eyes were filled with grief and fury. Jon walked out alone to meet him. No sword, no armor, only the truth. Grey Worm's voice was sharp as a blade. "You killed her?" Jon nodded. "I did. Why?" "Because she lost herself. She burned the city, killed the innocent. She would have done it again. She freed them." Grey Worm shouted. "She freed the world." "You took that away." Jon's voice was calm but heavy. "She freed no one. You think this is freedom? Look around you. It's death. It's fear. The Unsullied shifted, uncertain. They had been soldiers all their lives, built to follow commands, not to question them. And now their queen was gone. Grey Worm's hand went to his sword, but he didn't draw it. "You have no right to rule," he hissed. "You're not a king," Jon's jaw tightened. "Maybe not, but someone has to lead. Someone who remembers what mercy is." There was silence for a long time. The wind blew through the burnt streets. Then from the shadows came Sansa Stark and Arya, their faces covered in ash and travel dust. They had arrived from the north after hearing rumors of Daenerys' victory. Sansa's eyes widened when she saw the destruction. "What have you done, Jon?" He looked at her, tired and hollow. "What I had to." Arya's voice was quiet, almost sad. "You killed her, didn't you?" Jon nodded once. Sansa stepped closer, her expression unreadable. "Then the throne is yours. Whether you like it or not." Grey Worm's voice rose. "Never. She was our queen. You will pay for her blood." Jon turned to him. "If it's my blood you want, you'll have to take it. But I won't fight you. Not again." He spread his arms, unarmed, ready for the end. But something unexpected happened. A few Unsullied lowered their spears. Then a few more. They had no queen now, no water fight, and no purpose left. The silence grew heavier until even Grey Worm hesitated. Finally, he sheathed his sword. "We will leave," he said coldly. "We will sail away. But you will live with her death forever." Jon nodded slowly. "I already do." As the Unsullied marched away from the city, Jon watched them disappear over the blackened horizon. He didn't stop them. He knew they needed freedom in their own way. When they were gone, Sansa approached him again. "You know what they'll say," she said. "That you took the throne by murder." Jon looked out at the ruined city. "Then let them say it. I never wanted the crown. But someone has to fix what's left." Sansa's voice softened. "The people won't forgive easily." Jon turned to her, a flicker of fire in his tired eyes. "Then I'll earn it. Not as their king, but as their protector." But Davos stepped forward, shaking his head. "No, lad, you don't get to choose anymore. The realm will want a ruler, not a guardian. The question is, will you be one worth following?" Jon said nothing. He just stared at the ashes of the Iron Throne. knowing that every choice from now on would carry blood with it. And as night fell over the ruins of King's Landing, the whispers began. Jon Snow, the man who killed the Dragon Queen. Jon Snow, the new king, but Jon didn't smile, didn't celebrate. He just looked to the sky where Drogon had vanished and whispered quietly, "Forgive me." Days passed. The fires were finally out, but the smell of smoke never left King's Landing. The Red Keep, once proud and golden, stood half-broken against a grey sky. The people had begun to crawl from their hiding places, hungry, frightened, and lost. The city had no queen, no council, no ruler, only whispers. Jon Snow walked among the ruins with his cloak dragging through ash. Every face that looked up at him carried the same expression: fear, confusion, and a flicker of hope. They knew what he had done. They knew he had killed their queen. Some cursed him under their breath, others bowed. He didn't blame either. Tormund and Davos worked to restore order. They gathered food, built shelters, and tried to keep men from killing each other in the streets. But word had already spread beyond the city walls. Lords from every corner of Westeros were marching toward the capital, each one ready to claim the empty throne. By the end of the week, the great hall was filled again. Broken, scorched, but alive with voices. Sansa Stark stood beside Jon, her face cold and calm. Arya lingered near the shadows, silent as ever. Davos took his place among them, while Tormund leaned against a pillar, his massive arms crossed. The lords of the realm had arrived, men and women from every great house that still lived. Yara Greyjoy, proud and angry. Gendry Baratheon, newly named Lord of Storm's End. Brienne of Tarth, standing tall in her shining armor. Samwell Tarly, nervous but determined. They all looked at Jon. Yara spoke first, her voice sharp as a blade. "You murdered your queen. You broke your oath. Why should any of us follow you now?" Jon didn't flinch. "Because I did what had to be done. Daenerys burned the city. She would have burned more. You all saw what she became." Yara's eyes flashed. "She freed my people. She was going to break the wheel. She broke it," Sansa said coldly. "She broke everything." Sam stepped forward, his voice soft but clear. "What Jon did, it wasn't for power. It was mercy. He's never wanted the throne." The lords murmured among themselves. Then Gendry spoke. "If not him, then who? Who's left that the people would follow?" No one answered. There were no kings left, no queens. The Baratheons were gone. The Lannisters were dust. The Targaryens were ashes in the wind. Davos turned to Jon. "They're right, lad. Someone has to lead. You can rebuild what's left. Make peace with the North, the Iron Islands, the Riverlands." Jon shook his head. "I've spilled too much blood. I'm not fit to rule." Sansa looked at him, her eyes soft but firm. "Then who is?" Before Jon could reply, Bran was wheeled into the hall by Brienne. His face was calm, unreadable, eyes distant, like he was already seeing 1,000 things at once. The murmurs stopped. Bran spoke quietly. "The realm needs someone who won't seek power. Someone who understands the cost of it." Sansa frowned. "You don't mean yourself?" Bran looked at Jon. "He's right here." Jon stepped back, shaking his head. "No, I don't want it." Bran smiled faintly. "That's why you must take it." Yara slammed her hand on the table. "This is madness. A bastard from the north ruling the 7 kingdoms?" Sansa's voice was ice. "He's no bastard. He's Aegon Targaryen, son of Rhaegar and Lyanna Stark, heir to the throne by blood." The room fell silent. Every face turned toward Jon. Jon's voice cracked. "That name means nothing to me." But the lords began to whisper again, louder this time. "Aegon Targaryen, the blood of dragons, the man who killed the Dragon Queen." Sam looked at him with quiet pride. "You have the right to choose what kind of king you'll be." Jon stared at the melted remains of the Iron Throne. "A throne that brings nothing but death," Bran spoke again, his voice distant. "Then don't sit on it. Rule from the ashes. Build something better." Jon looked around the room, at the faces, the fear, the hope. He thought of Daenerys, of the thousands who died for her dream, of the weight of her last breath in his arms. Finally, he said quietly, "If I take this throne, there will be no more kings, no more queens, only the realm, only the people." Yara sneered. And who decides what's good for them? You, Jon looked her in the eye. No, all of us, Davos nodded slowly. A council. A ruler who serves, not commands. Sansa crossed her arms. And if the North wants to stay free? Jon gave a small smile. Then the North will stay free. For the first time in days, something like peace touched the air. Bran nodded slightly. Then it's done. And just like that, Jon Snow, the man who never wanted a crown, became the first ruler of a broken realm that no longer believed in kings. But not everyone was ready to accept that peace. Far across the narrow sea, in the shadows of Essos, whispers began to stir. Some said the Dragon Queen's followers were gathering again. Others said Drogon was seen flying east, carrying her body toward an ancient land where dragons were born. And in the halls of the Red Keep, Jon could almost feel a shadow moving, the weight of something unfinished, because in Westeros, peace never lasts. In Westeros, peace never lasts. The first days of Jon Snow's rule were quiet, too quiet. The city no longer burned, but it did not heal either. The smell of death still lingered, and the cries of the hungry filled the streets. The Iron Throne was gone, melted away, but its curse still clung to every stone in King's Landing. Jon didn't sit in a grand chair or wear a crown. He worked among the people instead. He rode through the streets every morning, speaking with the bakers, the smiths, and the children who had lost everything. He helped rebuild the market square with his own hands, his clothes as dirty as any soldier's. And though some still whispered that he was a murderer, others began to call him something else, the Broken King. A man who didn't want power, but took it to protect them. But peace in Westeros was never meant to last. Rumors began to spread, carried by traders and sailors. A fleet was forming across the narrow sea, an army of those who had once followed Daenerys Targaryen. They called themselves the Children of the Dragon, and they swore vengeance for her death. Grey Worm's ships had vanished into the mist long ago, but now people whispered his name again. Some said he was their leader. Others claimed Drogon had returned, carrying Daenerys's body to a place of fire and magic. Jon heard these whispers in the War Council that met every night in the half-ruined Red Keep. Sansa sat at his left, calm and cautious. Davos stood near the maps, while Arya lingered by the window, staring toward the sea. "They'll come," Sansa said. "And when they do, they'll want your head." Jon nodded slowly. I'd want mine too if I were them." Davos frowned. "We can't afford another war, lad. The people barely have enough to eat. The soldiers are tired and the walls are still half broken." Arya turned. "Then we strike first." Everyone looked at her. She shrugged. "If they're gathering across the sea, we find them before they find us. I can go." Jon shook his head immediately. "No, you've done enough killing. We all have." Her eyes narrowed. "You think peace comes without blood? You think Daenerys' followers will stop because you tell them to?" Jon didn't answer. He just stared at the map, at the sea between Westeros and Essos, dark and endless. That night, he stood alone on the balcony overlooking the city. The moonlight glinted off the waves below. His heart felt heavier than his armor. Sansa joined him quietly. "You can't keep carrying this alone," she said. "I killed her," Jon said softly, "and now they'll kill thousands for her. It never ends." Sansa sighed. "It never does. But you can still make something better than what came before. That's all we can do." He looked at her. "And what about you, the North?" "The North will stand with you for now," she said. "But it will always be free. You know that." Jon nodded, a faint smile crossing his tired face. "Good. Someone should be." A raven arrived the next morning, sealed with the mark of House Greyjoy. Yara's message was short and sharp. "The sea is restless. Ships gather under a black dragon banner. You are not the only one who remembers the Queen." Jon knew then that the storm was coming. Within days, he began preparing the realm. He sent ravens to every lord and lady who would still listen. He ordered the rebuilding of the navy and called for alliances between the remaining houses. Gendry promised men from Storm's End. Brienne gathered knights from the Riverlands. But even as they prepared, Jon's nights were haunted. He dreamed of fire, of Daenerys walking through it, her hair glowing white, her eyes full of sorrow. She would whisper his name, not in anger but in something far worse: forgiveness. Sometimes in those dreams he saw Drogon's shadow circling over the city, and one night the shadow became real. A scream tore through the sky, long, deep, and full of rage. Jon rushed to the battlements, heart pounding. The soldiers pointed upward, shouting. High above the clouds, a shape moved, vast wings slicing through the moonlight. For a moment the whole city froze. Then the dragon roared again and disappeared into the darkness. "It can't be," Davos breathed. Jon stared at the sky. "It is." The people began to panic. Bells rang, torches lit, and rumors spread faster than wildfire. The dragon has returned. The queen is coming back. Jon didn't sleep that night. He sat in the war room, staring at the map, his hand resting on Longclaw. He had taken the throne to stop destruction, to end fire and blood. But now, both were returning to him, and deep down he feared that this time the dragon would not stop until the man who killed its queen was nothing but ash. The city woke to fear. Every rumor that had once been a whisper now turned into a storm of voices. The dragon lives. The queen will rise again. Fire is coming. Jon Snow stood on the ramparts as the dawn broke red over the bay. The air was thick with sea mist and unease. He hadn't slept at all. Every hour through the night he'd heard bells, shouts, and the pounding of boots as soldiers took their posts. Tormund joined him, yawning, his red hair tangled and wild. "You look worse than I do, Snow," he muttered. Jon gave a faint, tired smile. "I feel worse." Tormund leaned on the wall. "So it's true then. The beast's alive." Jon nodded slowly. "I saw it with my own eyes. Drogon's back." "And the dead queen?" Tormund asked carefully. Jon didn't answer. He couldn't. He didn't believe in ghosts, but the image of Daenerys in his dreams, walking through flames, whispering his name, felt too real. Down below, the city stirred with unrest. Riots had begun in the lower streets. Some cursed Jon as a traitor and dragonslayer. Others begged him to protect them if the beast returned. Davos and Brienne had their hands full, keeping the soldiers calm. By mid-morning, the great hall was filled again. Sansa, Arya, Davos, Brienne, Gendry, and Tormund stood around the war table. The mood was dark. "We can't fight a dragon," Davos said. "Not with burned ships and half our men starving." "We don't need to fight it," Brienne replied. "If Drogon is here, it's because something, or someone, sent him." "We find out who." Arya's voice was low and sharp. "The children of the dragon. They've been gathering in Essos. Maybe they found a way to bring her back." Sansa frowned. "Back? That's impossible." Arya met her eyes. "Is it? We've seen the dead rise before." Silence filled the hall. Everyone remembered the long night, the frozen dead marching on Winterfell. In this world, nothing impossible stayed that way for long. Jon looked down at the map. His finger traced the coastline east of King's Landing. If Drogon came from the sea, he'll strike from Dragonstone first. It was her home once. Sansa shook her head. "You can't go there." "I have to," Jon said quietly. "If this is real, if they mean to bring her back, I have to see it myself." Arya spoke before anyone could argue. "Then I'm coming with you." Jon looked at her, a faint smile flickering through the exhaustion. "You always were too stubborn for your own good." "Runs in the family," she said. 2 nights later, they set sail for Dragonstone under a cold, grey sky. The sea was rough, the waves black as ink. Gendry's rebuilt ships cut through the water like ghosts. Jon stood on the deck, the wind pulling at his cloak, staring toward the dark shape of the island rising in the distance. Dragonstone had always felt haunted, but this time it was worse. The castle loomed over jagged cliffs, smoke still rising from the ancient towers where Daenerys's dragons had once slept. They disembarked quietly, moving through halls coated in dust and silence. The air was thick with the scent of salt and burnt stone. Then they heard it, a sound that froze everyone in place, a low, rumbling growl, deep and heavy, echoing through the tunnels. Drogon. Jon motioned for the others to stay back and stepped forward alone, Longclaw drawn but lowered. The dragon lay, coiled in the great hall, its black scales glistening like molten glass. Its golden eyes flickered open as Jon entered. For a long moment neither moved. Jon spoke softly. "I know why you're here." Drogon's breath came out in a slow hiss of smoke. "I didn't want to hurt her," Jon said, his voice breaking. "I loved her." The dragon growled again, louder this time, the air shaking with heat. Jon didn't flinch. "If you're here to kill me, do it. I won't stop you." For a heartbeat, Drogon reared back, the fire glowing in its throat. Arya shouted his name, but Jon didn't move. He closed his eyes and waited for the flames, but they never came. The fire burst upward instead, into the air above him, carving a shape against the stone. A mark burned into the ceiling, a circle of flame surrounding a dragon's eye. Then Drogon let out a deep, mournful cry and turned away, retreating into the darkness of the sea caves below the castle. Jon dropped to his knees, shaking. Arya rushed to him, but he barely heard her. His eyes were fixed on the mark, the strange, burning symbol still glowing on the ceiling. "What does it mean?" she asked. Jon whispered, "It means she's not gone." That night, a storm hit Dragonstone. The waves battered the cliffs, lightning flashing across the sky. And through the roar of thunder, Jon heard a sound that made his blood run cold. A voice carried on the wind, soft, distant and familiar. "Fire and blood will rise again." He turned, sword drawn, but there was no one there. Only the sea, black and endless. Yet deep inside, Jon Snow knew the Dragon Queen's story wasn't over. And the next time he faced her, it might not be as a dream. The storm passed, but Dragonstone did not feel any calmer after it. The waves still crashed hard against the cliffs, and every gust of wind carried a strange, hollow whistle through the halls. The marked Drogon had burned into the ceiling, an eye of flame, still glowed faintly in the dark. Jon Snow hadn't slept. He stood alone in the hall, staring up at that mark, until dawn broke over the sea. It wasn't magic he feared, it was what people would do because of it. By midday, Arya and Davos had returned from scouting the eastern shore. They'd found something strange. "Come see this," Arya said as she led Jon down to the old docks below the castle. Dozens of small boats had landed there, new, not wrecks. Each carried flags painted with the same fiery eye symbol Drogon had burned into the ceiling. On the shore, men and women knelt in the sand, chanting softly. They wore tattered red cloths and carried torches even in daylight. One of them stepped forward, a tall woman with silver blonde hair streaked with ash. Her eyes burned with fanatic devotion. "You are him," she said, "the breaker of the mother's heart. The one who will answer for her fire." Jon froze. "Who are you?" "We are the children of the dragon," she said proudly. "Our queen lives through her flame." Drogon carried her body east to the lands of Valyria, and there her spirit waits to return. "You killed her body, but not her purpose." Arya stepped closer, hand on her dagger. "You're mad!" The woman smiled calmly. "Madness and faith are sisters." Jon's voice was steady but heavy. "There is no queen. It's over." The woman tilted her head. "Then why does the dragon still serve her? Why did he mark this place? The mother's fire burns still, and it calls to us. Soon the sea will bring her wrath back to you." Jon didn't answer. He turned and walked away, his face pale. Back inside, Davos slammed a map down on the table. "It's not just them, lad. Reports from the coast say more ships are landing. Hundreds. They're spreading fast. stirring up the people with talk of her return. Some of the small folk are already kneeling in the streets. Sansa's voice crackled from the raven she'd sent from the north. They're calling her Daenerys Reborn. You need to put this down before it becomes another war. Jon leaned over the table, his hands gripping the wood so hard his knuckles turned white. If I start killing believers, I'll be no better than she was. Davos exhaled heavily. Aye, but if you don't, they'll burn this city again. They're not here for peace. For days the tension grew. The children of the dragon spread through the ruined streets of King's Landing like a fever. They spoke softly at first, lighting candles at shrines, whispering prayers to the Mother of Flame. Then they started carrying swords. They set fire to storehouses. A city still half in ruins, now burned again, this time in the name of a ghost. Jon rode into the chaos himself, wearing no crown, no armor. The mob parted as he passed, eyes wide. Some spat at him. Others cried for his forgiveness. At the steps of the old sept, he faced their leader again, the silver-haired woman from Dragonstone. Behind her, hundreds knelt, chanting Daenerys' name. Jon raised his voice. Your queen is gone. She brought fire and death. Don't make her ghost burn you too. The woman's smile was almost gentle. You cannot kill what fire loves? She gestured to the crowd. You see, even the small folk remember her mercy. You took her from them. You think the world forgives that? Jon's patience broke. She burned them alive. He shouted. I saw it. You think she'd have stopped with them? You think she'd have spared you? The crowd murmured uncertainly, but the woman only lifted her torch higher. You say she burned for peace. Then let peace burn too. With that, she threw the torch into a pile of dry wood. The flames roared to life. Men cheered, others screamed. The square became a furnace of light. Jon had no choice. Hold the line, he ordered, as Davos's soldiers pushed forward to stop the fire from spreading. The air filled with smoke and shouts. Steel clashed, and the city that had only just begun to heal tore itself apart again. By nightfall, the fires were out, but hundreds lay dead. The cult had scattered into the alleys, promising they would return. Jon stood in the ashes once more, the same smell, the same silence. Arya walked up beside him, face streaked with soot. You can't save people who don't want saving, she said quietly. Jon nodded slowly. Maybe not, but I have to try. From the sea came the distant sound of horns. New ships, bigger ones. Arya looked out at the dark horizon. Then you'd better try fast. Jon said nothing, but his hand fell to Longclaw's hilt. He'd ended one dragon's war only to face another. This time it wasn't about fire or blood. It was about the soul of the realm, whether it would keep chasing tyrants to worship, or finally learn to stand on its own. And somewhere out there, over the Black Sea, Drogon roared again, a sound that wasn't just anger anymore, but warning. The horns from the sea never stopped. By dawn, the horizon was lined with sails, black and red, marked by the same burning eye that Drogon had seared into Dragonstone. The children of the dragon had returned, not as a scattered cult, but as an army. From the battlements of the Red Keep, Jon Snow watched them approach. The morning light gleamed off thousands of shields and the long, narrow hulls of ships built for war. Behind him, King's Landing stood half rebuilt, half ruined, full of terrified people who had nowhere left to run. They mean to take the city, Davos said quietly beside him. And they'll burn it same as before, Jon nodded. They think they're finishing her war. Tormund spat over the wall. Then we finish theirs. Sansa's raven had arrived that night with her final message. The North will not come. She wrote that Winterfell would defend its own, and that the age of southern thrones had ended. Jon understood. He didn't blame her. The North had bled enough. Arya stood nearby, her face hidden beneath a hood. You don't have to die here, she said softly. We can leave before they land. Let the city fend for itself. It's not our home. Jon turned to her. I made it my home when I took this throne. If I run now, I'll be no better than the rest. She looked at him for a long moment, then said simply, Then I'll fight beside you. That morning, Jon gathered what men he could, a patchwork army of northerners who'd stayed behind. Knights of the Vale, Stormlanders under Gendry, and soldiers too tired to care who ruled as long as they had food. He spoke to them not as a king, but as a man. "I've stood on both sides of fire," he said. "I've seen what it does. The people coming here believe the dragon will save them. But I tell you, no one is coming to save us. We save each other, or we burn like the rest." There were no cheers, only nods. In this city, faith was a dead thing. The first wave of ships reached the shore before noon. Fires broke out along the docks as catapults hurled flaming barrels toward the walls. The air filled with smoke and screams. Jon rode through the chaos, sword drawn, shouting orders. Every street became a battlefield. The children of the dragon fought like zealots, chanting Daenerys' name with every strike. At one point, Jon found himself face to face with their leader, the silver-haired woman from Dragonstone. Her eyes were wild now, her hands stained with ash. "You can't kill her dream," she hissed. "She lives in us." Jon blocked her blade and knocked it from her hands. "Dreams that burn the world aren't worth saving." She spat blood, laughing. "You'll never kill the dragon." Jon drove his sword into the ground beside her, not her heart. "Then maybe it's time we stop trying to be dragons." He left her there as the city shook again, a deafening roar echoing over the walls. Drogon's cry, Jon froze. The sound was closer than before, the shadow vast across the sky. Soldiers and civilians alike stopped fighting to look up. The dragon swooped low, its wings blotting out the sun. Its roar rolled through the ruins, ancient and terrible. But it did not attack. It circled the city once, then landed on the ruins of the Red Keep, the same place where Daenerys had died. Every man on the battlefield fell silent. Jon walked alone toward the great hall. Dust and wind swirled through the open roof where Drogon waited. The beast's eyes glowed gold in the dim light. "I won't fight you," Jon said quietly. "If you came for revenge, take it." But Drogon only stared. It exhaled slowly, its breath hot enough to make the stones smoke. Then it turned its head toward the city, the chaos, the screaming, the fire spreading again. Jon followed its gaze. He understood. The dragon roared once more, louder than thunder, and took to the air. It flew east, over the sea, disappearing into the clouds. This time Jon knew it was truly gone. Without their symbol, the cult broke. Their cries turned to confusion, then fear. Soldiers laid down their arms, some fled. Others fell to their knees in silence. By nightfall, the fires had died. The battle was over. Jon walked through the streets, past the wounded and the dead, past men who had once called him traitor, and now bowed in weary gratitude. He found Arya watching the sea, her face streaked with dirt and ash. "It's done," she said. Jon shook his head. "It'll never be done. But maybe it's enough." The next morning, Jon gathered the few who remained in the throne room. Davos, Arya, Brienne, Gendry, and what was left of the council. "I'm leaving," he said simply. "There's no more place for kings here," Davos frowned. "And the realm?" Jon looked at him. "It'll choose its own path now. No more thrones, no more crowns. Let them govern themselves. If they can't, they'll learn." Arya smiled faintly. "And where will you go?" Jon's eyes turned northward, as if he could already see the snow falling. Home. If he could already see the snow falling. Home. And so, without ceremony, the last king of Westeros walked away from the ashes of the south. He rode alone through the wreckage, past the gates, and toward the wild lands beyond the wall. Years later, the people of Westeros would tell stories of him. The king who broke the throne, who ended the age of dragons and crowns. Some said he lived among the free folk, watching the seasons turn. Others claimed they saw a lone rider at the edge of the frozen forests, followed by a white direwolf. Whatever the truth, the wars of fire and blood ended with him. And in the end, Jon Snow was remembered not as a ruler, not as a conqueror, but as the man who finally let the world learn how to live without kings.